Yeah, I would say, excuse me, the number one thing from a stroke mechanics perspective is efficiency, right? So you need your stroke to be effective, like you're hitting the ball and it's going where you want it to, right? And then the efficiency of your movement. So really looking at body mechanics and what works and what doesn't. And that's different for different people. So even though we have some fairly classic techniques in tennis, and there's particular mechanics that go with the forehand and particular mechanics that go with the backhand or your serve or your volley, whatever that is, everybody's size and shape is different, right? And where they develop their power from getting behind the ball, and then how you fine tune where the ball is going on the court matters as well. So I think you have to look at downstream versus upstream for power generation, right? So if you're trying to hit the ball, hard or deeper or faster, then you need to be generating your power from the ground, right? So that's a matter of really getting your knees bent, your butt low, your pelvis and your trunk rotated to get behind it, so that you're using the power of the heavier part of your body, and then you're using your upper extremity for ball placement, right? And fine tuning where the spin on the ball or where the ball is going on the court. So kind of keeping that in mind. And if you're not getting proper power generation from the lower half of your body, then you're going to have to try to get power from the upper half of your body, right? So that's a really big deal, because that's where we see overuse injuries. In tennis or pickleball, you're doing repetitive motions over and over and over again, right? So if you one time do a weird shot where you ended up having to really power through your shoulder, no big deal. But if you're doing that 90% of the time, you're not going to hold up. You're going to have a ton of injuries. So really working on and understanding that, the mechanics and how to leverage your whole body and where you generate your power from, right? And then things that we'll see that also play a factor in that, of course, is your body, right? So having the body mobility to be able to get into those positions. But from a technique perspective, there's so much cool technology out there now that you can do a little video analysis of your strokes, and you can even break it down really quickly and easily on any of these programs. So it's a lot easier to kind of see where your technique is flawed or where you're missing the steps within that, right? And again, it'll look a little bit different for each person. So you have, on a serve, are you getting rotated and butt back enough? And are you pushing up and through the ball, or are you somebody that's pulling through the ball, by bending at the waist, right? So there's efficient ways to do it. And watching the pros doesn't necessarily mean you're getting the right way of doing it, right? I mean, how many players did we see that just had technique that I think they just got there by pure brute, not because they actually had good technique. So
they're master compensators.
That's exactly right. So understanding, a proper technique is huge. And sometimes, just working 1 or 2 sessions with a pro to kind of work on those little details can make a big difference in how you're doing. It's not necessarily something you have to do all the time, but yeah, well, number one, recovery is preparation, right? So that's the biggest thing to know. Is it's very interesting how many people will spend all this time doing their warm up, and then they don't do anything to warm down after, or vice versa. They don't do anything to prep, and then they just, spend some time doing a little bit of warm down. So it's very interesting. The number one thing that I have written down here in my notes, just based on this question, is quality sleep. Sleep is so important for effective function of every aspect of our body, and people are chronically deprived of sleep or not getting enough sleep. And I was on this athlete sports medicine, functional medicine webinar yesterday, and it was really interesting that new research is showing like the average adult should be getting 7 to 8 hours of sleep at night. We kind of know that that's kind of been typical, and they're finding that athletes actually should be getting at least 9 hours of sleep. Just based on the amount of energy they're expending and being able to recover. So, depending on what level you are and how much you're playing, right? If you're somebody that just goes out and plays pickleball on Saturdays, that's a different story than somebody that's more serious in their sport and playing all the time. So quality sleep is a big thing. And then another thing that I think, especially having gone down the route of functional medicine, is having adequate fuel and the appropriate timing of that. So what you eat and when you eat it is also really important for recovery and preparation. And we saw that all the time on the tour. The crap that the athletes were eating or when they were eating was kind of mind-boggling, right? Well, when you're 18 years old and you're a professional athlete, your metabolism is a little bit different. You can get away with it for a while, but as you age, and when you're younger, when you're talking about kids that are in puberty that are playing sport too, that stuff's a lot more important. So really looking at, are you taking in enough calories for what you need? And then what's the timing of those calories? So for instance, from a recovery perspective, you really do want to eat something within 30 minutes, 45 minutes that is at least a snack so that your muscle glycogen, is still being burned. So you want to try to get as much more of that in there while it's still in that burning phase. So that's important. And then, pre-playing, depending again on are you going into a match, you're going to practice, how rigorous is it going to be? You don't want to be eating within 30 minutes of playing, certainly not a meal. So you can have a little quick energy snack within 20 minutes of playing, but you should be eating your meal like 2 to 3 hours before that, so that it has time to work its way into the muscles for storage there. And then making sure there's adequate protein, right? We see the food quality, particularly in the United States where we are, is not very good. So you see people that have all these food intolerances now, right? So understanding, right, what the quality of your food is. And so you see more people going, vegan or vegetarian, or they can't have dairy or their whatever it is, a lot more dietary restrictions. And so then really understanding the fuel that works for you in terms of being able to have adequate fuel to get you through that match or through that practice. So yeah, I would say sleep and food are probably two of the biggest things. And hydration, obviously, is, I think athletes are pretty good about drinking at least during sport, but maybe not so great about drinking when they're not on the court, particularly older athletes. So as we're talking about your baby boomer pickleballers, drink more water, and the men don't want to because they got a prostate issue, and the women have, whatever pelvic floor thing. So I don't want to drink more water because I have to pee all the time. Okay, but now you're chronically dehydrated, which affects muscle function, muscle recovery, right? Your ability to generate power. So really making sure that you're adequately hydrated throughout the day, not just during sport.